Discover Life. We're still here until further notice.
All right. Shall I go?
Yes.
Okay. So just a quick update on Discover Life. As you know, there's been problems with getting on. Those problems are that are generated by AI. And so in order to create AI of everything, including bees, they have to scrape it out of somewhere. So because the pic site has incredible numbers of pictures, many moths, many bees, all kinds of things, they spend a lot of time trying to get in there, and it takes a long time to download. We're talking like 1 million hits a day, that kind of thing, and it's just sort of a denial of service. Anyway, they seem to have fixed that. There's a team work going on between the provider, which is Sam Houston State University of Texas, and PIC. PIC is excluding bots. I guess we don't need to go into details. Anyway, it's working really well now. And if you do have problems, you may inadvertently have been excluded as a bot. Right? A terrible thing unless you're like a fly. But so you can email PIC and he'll put you on the not bot list, and you'll get the same speed that everyone else. But largely what I've seen and not heard any real complaints is that everything's really fast. It's up, it's running, it's good. So that's the update. It seems to be pretty stable. It's been doing that for the past 2 weeks, which is a long time in this system. Periodically, some new group decides they want to get into AI, and then we may run into problems for a little bit, but I think they have a generalized solution. So if there's any questions, you can email me or throw it in the chat on that. We continue to work on Discover Life. We are, today, we're going to be working on, sorry, I'm distracted here. We're going to work on more Callandrena males. So we've gone through the females, we're doing males. We did simplex, placata, and Kriegiana, and I can't remember. Did we do gardineri this last time? I don't know that we did.
We did not.
Okay. Anyway, we have a few more. I am limited by the specimens I have in males, but let's start with fulvipennis. So fulvipennis is uncommon in the East. It's associated with I forget the official name, but let's call it the chicory group.
I'm going to back up. So we wrapped up with asteris and said that we were going to do a comparison between that and asteroides. Yep. Do you want to pick up there, or are you going to move back around?
I've got already the specimen on deck for fulvipennis, so I'll do that one next. How about that?
Sounds great. Love the plan.
All right. Thanks, Claire. So fulvipennis, chicory group. So that's like Heterotheca, mostly southern. I believe we're maybe New Jersey, towards the northern edge of the range, across mid-continent. More common in prairie-like environments. Very dark wings, midsummer when these plants are blooming. And so these are lower Asteraceae plants. So they're maybe knee high. You can get a bit bigger. Heterotheca can get 1 meter tall sometimes, but they're little flowers, and it's a much smaller bee than some of the other species like asteris and helianthoides and those kinds of groups, species in the base. Okay, let me share. Let's see. Get to the right place. And we'll jump to the microscope and to the guide and look at some features. Did it share yet? There we go, I think. Okay. So let's go to the microscope here. And frame that's in the way. Capture and live. So yeah, generally smaller, sort of like you would say, oh, maybe I'm looking at a Halictus in the field, very banded looking, little yellower than some of the Halictus ones. Get it into, this looks like the white balance is messed up here, but let's get it in focus first. It is not a blue bee. So I should have a white balance. Auto exposure, continuous AE, auto white balance. Let's try that. There we go. Better. So what the pin's in the way, you can see the abdomen. This is just vibe. It's very dark wings. Let me do the full screen thing. Strong bands on the end. Like many of the Callandrena, you'll see a lot of it. It doesn't really reflect light. There's a lot of light on this particular shot, but if we drill in, you can see that it's dulled by lots of cross hatching. I don't know if every single one has this, but almost all of them. That's sort of a characteristic of the species. When we flip around, we see that, like most, except Kriegiana in our group of specimens, we have a, hey, hang on for a second. Hey, I'm online. The other what?
Broken heads. I did that already.
Okay. You might have to flip them on, or just leave them, and I'll do them. And leave a controlling tab for me so I can. All right, but I would like to have a controlling tab so that I can set the spray things myself. Sorry, we're a break in the life of the lab. So, okay, where was I? Okay, yellow. So, like most of these, except Kriegiana, we have, I think this is too much light. I'm going to knock it down. They don't trust me with the control tab. And we're going to bring the light down here. Take it down. That looks a lot better. Okay, so strong yellow, Clypeus, and like a number of them, not everyone and not every specimen. So like there are almost always going to be some specimens that don't have or do have a small yellow spot about in the same area. So this is a pattern that occurs throughout. We'll see it in gardineri in some and fulvipennis in some, but you're not getting a big blotch of yellow, but you're getting this little mark. So in Discover Life, it is scored both for completely yellow, Clypeus, dark paraocular area, and completely yellow, Clypeus, some yellow present in the paraocular area because of this little dot. Easy to overlook though, particularly when the hairs are conveniently matted down. I think those are the basic characters. We'll do a quick look on the species page for that. I'm looking at under my microscope. Sometimes there are interesting things on terms of well, this is kind of interesting. We take a look here as we are. We're going to look at, as one should in males, in probably any group, but in particular in Andrena, it's so often a good character, is to look at what's going on, and let's call it S6, so sternite 6 area. And just to orient here, let's focus it. So there's a sticky outy thing. This is S8, which is sometimes retracted, but most of the time is visible within what's going on in there in terms of the genitalia, sometimes can be poking out, and there's a busyness. So S6 is this next sternite here. We're not counting back. We can't see the others. But S6 is often shaped uniquely, or it's shaped in a way that will eliminate a bunch of other species. So this one has, it's a little bit difficult to see here. I might turn it in a second, but it's got a unique, compared to what I've seen normally, a set of hairs that are rising up from the edges of the specimen. If we turn it sideways, we can see these upright hairs? That's usually not there. You usually don't get hairs that come above the tops of the S6. So when we go back to the guide, and look up the fulvipennis species account, one of these days we'll make all these accounts uniform, but we have things that need to be done in the lab right now. So you can see this distribution coastal plain going on right here, not interior at all. And you also often get some reddishness in the males, and they have, in the females rather, and the females have a very brushy, as do most Callandrena, set of scopal hairs. But we're looking at the male. So here we have the male. This one does not seem to have a yellow marking there. Now let's see if we have any notes. So we have, I guess, Laberge's notes here rather than mine. So I think that's usually an indication that we don't really have too much problem identifying this species. So female, combination of characters, deeply infumate, so that would be very dark brown. Hind tibia and basal portions of basal tarsi, yellow to red. I don't know if that's in the females, but we'll look on the males here too. Hind claws, females, that's a female character. Okay, rounded out, low generally. Yeah, so mostly this is going to key out very easily in Discover Life with those combinations. Let's take a look, though. I was not looking at this while we were looking at the legs and see if they are indeed red. So back down in the male. In the females, I know that I've seen this, and sometimes it's reddish. This doesn't look at all reddish to me, so I'll take a quick look. I have one other specimen, old one here. And in the male, you know, there's a vague rustiness to the tibia, but nothing like you would notice when looking at the specimen. I didn't see it when I started here, and today, and this specimen, looking at the tibia, doesn't really have that. Okay, so that's an introduction to fulvipennis. And most of the time, these are present in sand. It may and probably is a sand specialist needing sand to do its nesting. Okay, as promised, we're going to jump back to asteris and asteroides, which are, so that species, fulvipennis, it's more of a midsummer species, maybe a little bit late summer. When you get to asteris and asteroides, up here in the mid-Atlantic, we're talking strongly fall. So asteroides, I think in particular, can go well into October. And as the name implies, they're hanging out on aster, but I think it's aster and goldenrod combination kind of thing. So let's take a look now at asteris, which apparently we were looking at, but I can't recall that. So we'll come in here and we look at the face. And again, what we're seeing is there's our completely yellow Clypeus, but another species with the male having a yellow spot right next to the clipial edge there. And I think that's in asteris, this is much more consistent than other species. And you can see it's relatively large. I wouldn't be at all surprised that someone could find a specimen without that. Let's jump to the asteris species account. Move this box out of the way. And get here. So relatively uncommon bees. And we get down here. So these are our notes. So there is some discussion on separating them. Males have a yellow clypeus and paraocular area. Okay. And then we have F2 through 11. Looks like my notes cut out there for some reason. Oh, so the flagellar segments on the outer flagellar segments other than F1, so that first one, are dark below. F1 equal to F2 plus F3, and F1 shorter than F4, S6. So that sternite we're looking at strongly reflects. So let's see if we can just locate that kind of information. Let's go to the antennal segments right now. So we flip over and take a look here. Antennal segments are just always useful, in some groups, are very useful and always worth a glance, particularly if you have some kind of questions. Okay, and you can, after a while, you notice these. So here's F1, and I'm going to say there was something about F1 being roughly equal to F2 and F3. So F1, F2, and F3, I could see that. I'm not going to get out the ruler with an image projecting screen like this. We could actually measure it. You could actually, and sometimes you can just do this, so you don't have to have something fancy. I can just put a ruler literally up against that screen. Additionally, if you're using just microscopes and don't have anything digital, you can buy a measuring reticule, which goes into the ocular pieces of your microscope and allows you to measure things too. I have to say, I've had those and I have opportunities here, and I rarely use them. My feeling is like I should be able to identify these things without getting into measurements or genitalia. I know that doing that makes some of my identifications a bit more difficult, but I can compare to specimens and things like that. But I almost never have to go that far. So F1 equal to F2 plus 3, we demonstrated that. And I also feel like most people either can't or don't have that capacity to do these measurements. So it should be obvious from looking at it. F1 shorter than F4. Right. So F1, and here is 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see if I need to move this a little bit. So here's F1, and F1 and 2, 3, 4. F4 is definitely shorter than F1. So let's see, let's look at that again. So F1 shorter than F4. Not really the case. S6 strongly reflects. We'll look at that, and we'll also go to the guide because there is almost certainly a pair of characters, a character with two states telling the two species apart. All right, we're going back and we're looking at S6. So it'd be strongly reflects. So reflects means bent. And if you're looking under a microscope at the underneath, it means bent up. If you were imagining the bee in its normal position, it would be bent down. But it's easier to think about as bending up because that's the orientation you're using under the microscope. All right, let's see if this is going to be a good view station. You can kind of see it. We'll change the orientation again. So here's these things, genitalia or hairs, and possibly a bit of S8 sticking out. S7 is almost never visible. It's underneath there though. Here's S6, and what's going on? S6 basically is sliding underneath S5 over here. It comes down, and my focus keeps changing. And then it's right before this opening where all kinds of stuff is going on. And it's the last piece. And I suppose that's why it has different characteristics. So in this one, it's reflects. So you can see the upturned end right here. We'll change the perspective so you see it a little bit better. And it seems to be sharp, right? It's basically, when we talk about sharp, it usually means it's a right angle. And the characteristics of the shape of that opening from above, when you have the specimen upside down, also is something that is useful. It's not nearly as useful as what is the going on with the segment rim, in this case, turned at right angles. So let's take a slightly different view of this. And I'm going to change it a little bit, see if we get a shot from the side. Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's some hairs. I'm going to see if I can get up even further. So there's some hairs in the way here, but it is showing you, and again, you're holding this by hand and can see some of these things a little bit better. So this tuft of hairs, underneath that lies that upturned rim. So here's the base, the normal platform of the sternites here, and here is S6 base, and then it flips up. So these hairs are in front of it. There's the lip, the rim of S6, showing the backside and the opening. Let me see if I can just slightly swivel this without
Maybe a
losing
bit more
it.
light too.
Pardon?
Maybe a bit more light,
Okay.
or like a light card right behind it or something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually use the flashlight, but can't quite see that there. Let me try and put a little label underneath. Maybe that helps. It's subtle. And so here again is the rim. It's not, if this were a flattened rim, in other words, there would not upturned, you would not see any of this. It would be a continuous surface like you see in these other sternites. It just would be flat all the way. But removing the hairs, which we're not going to do, you would see that this rim is bent. I don't know that I can show a better angle on that. We showed several in this case. All right, so we still have the mystery of why F4 is not longer. So I think it was F1 was supposed to be shorter. Now let's go to the guide. So we go to menu and slide this. Oops, it's going to go to the top. Oops, sorry. And we go to has. So this has all the couplets, all the pairings, and we are going to just do a search for asteris. Should be a couplet, although apparently there is not, unless it's not searching over here.
Nope, you just have versus braccata.
Oh, okay. All right. So there is no, so that combination of probably the upturned edges, I'm still a little leery, although let's go back.
Asteroides versus braccata, so nope, nothing.
Okay. So the asterisk must come out very easily with those characters that we were just looking at. Let's see if Dr. LaBerge says anything here. So here's LaBerge's account. And talk about the female. The male is readily distinguished from that of simplex by the small yellow paraocular maculae. And so apparently it is it is regular or almost always present. And so he's not saying sometimes not present, like it is in others. And you can see here is acknowledging that even in simplex, which we don't think of as having those, it has them every once in a while. This seems to be a feature of Callandrena to throw a little yellow sometimes into the paraocular area. Larger size heliothorax. That's just with simplex, so I think that combination eliminates most of the others too. I don't know where I got the, well, scape equals segments 1 to 4. Segment 1's about equal to 2 plus 3. Segment 2 about equal to 3, and both shorter than 4. So that's a mistake. I'm going to have to go back because there is no, absolutely, given this logical set of equations here, 1 cannot be shorter than 4. So I'll go back and put a note to fix that.
But Sam, I went into the characters, like the characters task for it. The only thing that seems at all notable in there is the propodial triangle form of sculpturing. It is under the uncommon with longitudinal regulae in basal half, tessellate, or smooth at the apex. So I guess with the combo of other fairly generalized ones, that might also just make it a winning combo in the Callandrena friends.
Yeah, I've never had any problems keying this one out. I think the paraocular areas are always big like that, so that eliminates a lot of things. And then the other characters are not a problem. All right, let's take a look at asteroides. It's in the females, they're much more likely to be mixed up. And I think all of these have very strong bidentate. Excuse me, I'm taking off the labels. Bidentate teeth. If we look at the face, we'll see a face without paraocular yellowness. So here, oops, we have yellow hairs, but we don't have any yellow in that area. Let's take a look at what we say for asteroides in here that helps us separate it from the other Callandrena species. There's asteroides. You see it's got a fairly limited range. And we don't have any notes on it, but Laberge, the male of asteroides, differs from that of asteris by the short vertex. Okay, so when he talks about a short vertex, it's going to be the distance between the eyes and the back, or the ocelli and the back of the head. And the lack of yellow on the paraocular area, we saw that. Maculae just means yellow marking or a marking. The longer second and third flagellar segments and the slightly smaller size. It's very difficult to see the slightly smaller size, but let's jump to the antennal segments, and then we can also do a little comparison with the compare feature. So, zooming in, may have to adjust the light here, I think. Turn this direction. All right. I'm going to do some more light. That should work. Okay, good. So recall that in asterisk F1, we got that right. F1 was equal in length to F2 plus F3. And here, F1 is about the same size as F1. maybe even shorter than F3. So very clear differences there. And that's a general character in the guide. So that would separate it out right there. And that's probably why we don't see an asterisk asteroides difference. We do have the asteroides lined up here. Maybe we'll do a jump back to asterisk to look at that. So if we look at the distance, I want to change the orientation here. That's too oblique an angle. What we're looking for is that short vertex. So it's not defined by Laberge as to how short is short or what that measurement is, but let me take a look. So in looking at this, we have a roughly, so I would say if we're using this as our measurement, that we have one and maybe a little bit more. So slightly greater than a cellar distance to the back of the head. Now I'm going to very quickly put the asterisk specimen back on and we'll look at the antennal segments there. To get the labels on, or I periodically forget and then it's too late. I have no idea where those went. Okay. So I think I have an orientation here that will just show up very white. Okay, so there's, again, just a reminder on here's F1 equal basically to F2 plus F3, or just about very clear difference there. Then if we parse back to the asteroids, we're looking theoretically, as implied by what Mitchell said, there's a greater distance to the back of the head. And there indeed is. So here is one of the lateral ocelli, and you can see, I mean, it's not huge, but it is, in fact, it may not even show up very easily because we usually do things in increments of one. So here's one and well, halves. And so it's at least one and maybe a half there, but yeah, I'd say maybe 1.5, not quite two. Go to the guide, and what we can do is compare the two species, looking at differences. So we go differences, let's reset it so I get rid of any species that I've marked, and we're going to compare asteris to asteroides. Let's enter. And now I've got, on the left-hand side, you have to remember asterisk. On the right-hand side, asteroids. These are things that differ. So sometimes it's just the addition of one character, but let's go, instead of spending all day on this. Antenna length first, the first flagellum layer, as long as second plus third. Yes, we saw that in asterisk. And here it's listed for all three, but if you chose one of these shorter ones, which was indeed the case, you'd see that you would differentiate very easily from the two just with that characteristic, and as well as the clipial paraocular area. So there's a bunch of things that take it away from, or separate the two. I'm just curious though how we scored it. Vertex height. So here we have with asterisk, which is our longer one, we have 1 to 1.5 and 1.5 to 2 as both being a possibility. I would agree with this. Here we have 1 or 1 to 1.5. So there is overlap if you chose that state, but you would get separation from those states. And that's sort of how the guides work, is you have many routes to the right answer, and you don't want to necessarily choose one. If it's ambiguous, you would choose both states. And then maybe it doesn't resolve, but a lot of times there's a really good character somewhere else. Or you have to look at specimens. Okay. I think we have worked through those two. Let's jump to another. Most of these are lovers of composites. I'm trying to think if there's anything that really isn't on composites. So aliciae is a little bit earlier, so it's late summer, early fall. It's a sunflower specialist. I was just speaking with Jack Neff, and he says that in the Midwest, you'll see these on annual sunflowers all the time because annual sunflowers are basically a weed and they grow feral, whereas in the East, they actually don't grow feral. You plant them all the time, but never consistently enough to build up a population of the sunflower specialists. So there is one character that really separates out asteris from, we'll show you here, from the other, all other Andrena actually, but it's one that you don't necessarily look at. But once you get into reading about, did I say asteris? I meant aliciae. This is aliciae. So it's sunflower specialist, perennial sunflowers in the East, including annuals in the West. And it would include annual sunflowers in the East if they were available near a site, which is uncommon, where they occur. I'm knocking down the sunshine on this slide. Okay. Okay, that's better. So first thing, no yellow in the paraocular area, at least in this particular specimen. Now, the unique thing, and we can look for some other characteristics here too, but the really unique thing is if we go to the labrum area, and this one may not show super well, but there are yellow markings. So here's the label process, which is, I think, rounded there. There's underneath the hairs. Can we change the orientation here a little bit? It's difficult to see. Let me get a different specimen and see if I can show it up. But there's yellow on either side. This is an old specimen. Let's see if this newer specimen shows this better. And that's unusual for all other Andrena. No other Andrena have yellow at all on their labrum. It's a fairly big bee, bigger than the last two we were looking at. All right, you can, this one actually has it more readily. Actually, it's the same sort of thing. So it's a little bit more distinguished. It's right there and right there, these yellow patches, but those hairs sort of distract. Maybe if I pull it back a little bit more, you don't see the glare of the hairs, but you can see these yellow spots. Sometimes they almost converge, but usually they're like that. There are two lateral kinds of things. Well, we're looking at the head here. So you'll see that the label process is not bidentate like some of the others are. It is more in line with either entire, it's hard to tell at that angle, or just slightly emarginate. Antennal segments, we run this up. Take a look at, already you can kind of see this is blacker than the others. And that's my general impression. So I believe this is F1, 2, 3. So fairly long F1, about the same length now as 2 and 3 there. I'm not sure that those are significant. Let's jump over and look at so let's get rid of these check marks. And we'll click on aliciae. And see what we have here. So here's our notes. Got a little folder that keeps popping up. Males often have bright yellow markings on either side of the labrum. Okay. The process is dark, so that labral process is dark, but those two dots are very, very different from almost everything else. But I do note here, some specimens are all dark or only have small marks. So useful, but maybe not in its absence. What does LaBerge say here? Common eastern species. I wouldn't say it's common. It's at least not in Maryland. It's certainly not common. Closely related to asteris, but differs from either. Is this only talking about the females? Well, and it's very distinct in the female. See here, yellow female clypeus. Almost nothing in the female has a yellow clypeus. But in the male, again, it looks like many, many other species of Andrena with yellow in the clypeus. And the sculpturing of propodium as described below. I'm not sure what that's referring to. And so I'm going to skip it and look at the specimen directly and see if there's anything about the propodium that is remarkable enough. And we'll see if it's in the guide. I see basically a propodium that is very dulled by microscopic lines, but so what? Most of these species are. So it has fairly dark wings. It's not super useful because others, it's a little bit subtle, right? Does it have dark wings? Does it not have dark wings? Let's take a look at the has menu. Click it correctly. And, well, right off the top, there's aliciae versus helianthe. Thorax scutum, hair dense, yellowish brown. Abdomen tergites with a wide yellowish transparent rim. Okay. And helianthe has scutum, hair is thin. So hair is dense in aliciae, hair is thin in helianthe, and white gray rather than yellowish brown. Tergites opaque and black. And let's take a look at our aliciae and see if we have rims that are somewhat transparent. Wow, that is dark now. Some light. Take this down. There we go. Well, there's seeing a thin rim there. But
We're also seeing a calendar notification whenever you are done focusing.
probably supposed to be teaching a class. It's a little goopy specimen. I don't see anything. Perhaps this is the very thin rim that is clear on this, but these are very goopy specimens, or this one is. Let me see if I do have a couple others.
There's a pretty good picture on Discover Life.
Showing the rims in their glory.
Yeah, one of the macro photos.
Okay. We'll go with that then. Otherwise, it has a lot of the other kinds of characteristics that the other species have. Probably the fact that the label process is only emarginate instead of bidentate is one. It doesn't really have the upturned rim either. And it has actually, interestingly, it's S8, I'll show that, is very emarginate or cut out, which is unusual. Usually they're flat. This one is almost pointed. Andrena erigeneae is the one that is the classic for that character. Get my glasses on. We the head maybe is going to block this. Oh, no, I think we got it. Okay, so here's S8. This is sort of a classic way to see S8. It sticks out through the opening behind S6 here, and you have hairs, of course, on top of it. What do those hairs do? But this is pretty visible that you see that this, instead of being flat or slightly convex, it's actually cut out, and it's almost like a V, but it's really just a deep emargination and oval recess concavity there, which is different. So not sure if there's any, apparently there's no other strong characters. That one is very unique, but the problem is sometimes it's not there. And a lot of times you don't have any idea to even look for something like that. Like I had even forgotten that that characteristic was there. So I think it's the kind of thing that you end up plowing through the guide, and the combination of the characters helps. So here's another one. Clypeus protrudes below bottom rim. Braccata, Clypeus protrudes below bottom of margins by about 3/10, 4/10. That is hardly useful. Its total length, apex of yellow region convex. Label process broad, about 3 times as broad as long. Label process trapezoid in shape, about 3/10 as about 2.5 as broad. This is very obviously Braccata and aliciae are pretty close, but it has, and I'm surprised I didn't mention it here, it has that yellow sometimes, but in this particular instance, we're not mentioning it. Tergum 2, pits usually obscured. Tergum 2, pits weak but visible, separated by 3, by more than 3. Those are all problematic. It's the kind of thing where, like in any kind of identification stream, the final check is comparing your specimen to a known specimen. And that's the need for museums and big collections, so that you can go ahead and do that. And you say probably almost right away that that obviously is something different from what I'm looking at when you do a comparison. Because these are real differences, but a lot of times telling them apart at the level of I have a single specimen is tricky. And that's where we see a lot of mistakes being made, just because the comparative material is not available and the separation differences are subtle. And in dichotomous keys, they're even worse. So you might be one of these characters might separate these two or send you down a path, and you would need more information than that. How are we doing on time?
About 10 minutes left.
10 minutes? Okay, let's jump to, which is good because I think that is it after, in terms of my specimens. So, asteris, asteroides,
I will
helianthe.
speak to the braccata because we just had that comparison. If you go onto the species page, your notes just say that you have not seen this species.
Yeah.
Its labor process is large and rhomboidal. I'll put the rest of it in the chat, but we have very few pictures of it as well.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I only have some females. It's not a very common species, braccata, either. Seems to be very, very oriented towards sand. Okay, gardineri, a moderate sized one, and this is a bee of early summer. So almost, if you were able to identify it as a Callandrena, you would see that it's something that is out earlier than most of the others, except for Kriana, in the case of the specimens that we were talking about. So let's go take a look at this. So they're on Pachyra. It's a Pachyra specialist. So that used to be called, well, it's golden asters. No, golden ragwort. And very tightly tied to that. And it is another, a little difficult to tell in this one. And I can't tell. This is one where the small yellow dots on the side are sometimes visible and sometimes absent or not visible. Here, it's possible that they're in there, but these hairs are preventing us from really seeing into that specimen. I know that in the female, the labral process is important in ID. I believe it is bidentate, so likely we have a bidentate male, and we do. So you can see here, we'll zoom in a little bit. Very deeply notched out labral process up through here. And I believe that that helps separate out the males quite a bit. Let's take a look at what we have. I know that in keying these out, every once in a while I'm surprised by them. Like, what is that? And then it turns out it is a specimen of gardineri. Moving that out of the way. Let's go to the species page. Well, let's see what they have here, if anything. Well, there's 4, so there's going to be something here. Arabis, also a spring species, but interestingly, it is a species that is into spring. Gosh, what's the plant group? It's things like toothwort and mustards, spring mustards. So head clip is color white to off-white. That's very different. And instead of the yellow for Arabis, texture dull, heavily covered in microscopic lines. Gardineri head clipius color yellow, T1 shiny, no or nearly no microscopic lines. That's worth looking at because what we've been seeing in the specimens so far that are Callandrena are very, very heavily tessellated or dulled specimens. So we're looking for few to no microscopic lines on T1. And we can see already the shininess. You're seeing the reflection of the ring light. When we zoom in, it's a little bit difficult to see here with this thing, but there's really not, if you look away from the light, you can see you're really seeing something that doesn't have a lot of the super dulled microscopic line action that we saw on most of the other species that we were looking at there. All right, back to the guide. I'll get there. Tubid texture shiny, no microscopic lines. Let's go to the next. Oh, no, they were all related to this one character. Can look here. It has one thing that is distinct, it will take, oh, that's the female, has very short facial fovea. But we're looking at males. Okay, here's our notes. Female. Male has a yellow clipius, occasionally yellow pyroocular areas. Turga and sterna narrowly highlined, so has clear edges to the turgites and the sternites, which is unusual. And S6 is reflexed. Let's take a quick look at those as we close out the day.
And before we drop off, let's have a quick conversation about what are they pollinating and where did they overwinter?
Okay. That is an interesting question. All right. Sometimes this notion of clear in when I've got I don't have any vellum paper or other things that are diffusing the light are difficult. So it's not very clear here that they do have clear rims in this kind of shot.
There's a really good one on Discoverly.
Okay. Then taking a look underneath, see if there's anything a bit more. Oh yeah. I think from here you can see it's just unusual to see this on the sternites, that they have big, clear high line, in other words, edges to the rims. And here's what they were talking about. Reflects. It's a little easier to see than the, I think, asteris that we were looking at. We'll try and zoom in there, but you can see, first of all, that it's swooping. Other species will have it the opposite. It'll swoop in that direction. And it's, you can see this darker edge. That's the rim of the sternites, in this case S6, that all the other sternites are all in the same plane, and then the rim flips up. It's like a piece of sheet metal that's bent up. And let's see if we can see that here. I think better. There's fewer hairs, I guess. So here I'm just showing, here's our friend S8. I'm not sure if that's really an emargination or it's bent the other direction because of the angle that we're looking at. But here is the S6. So this is S8. And here is the edge of S6. This is just a really rich area, let's call it, to look at, particularly if you're comparing a set of specimens, because often these areas differ. So here you can see not a lot of hair in this case, and the rim, it gets flipped up along this whole edge and at almost right angles. And so those are apparently some of the good characters. So I guess there are questions about gardineri. So,
I think that the spring Andrena in general.
Well, I mean, that covers a lot of species. So spring in the east has the most pollen and nectar, just if you were to do a measurement of how many gallons are available in an acre, because of the vernal flora in the forest floor and then the blooming trees and shrubs. This Pachyra, though, is a sort of on the edge plant. It does occur in the forest, so I see it here in Maryland in forest areas, but it kind of likes a little bit better as areas that are becoming forested or the edges of woods or wet spots where basically more light is coming in. But they certainly do well, and I've got them planted all over my house under trees and shrubs, and they do well, but they do really well in the open too. So they bloom there, and there's some murkiness, right? So some of the Pachyra species, which is a pretty big genus of plants, don't seem to be attractive to gardineri. And we also have not one species, but a series of species that take us at least to the Rockies, if not further. And this species, gardineri, is across that area. And so that makes one think that maybe we have more than one species that we're playing with in terms of the gardineri. I've noticed some differences between specimens. And then some of these Pachyra species seem to be of no interest to gardineri. Here, the one that I've seen it on the most is not the ones that are in the woods in the bottomlands behind my house, or in my yard, but in some of these barrens areas and in sandy spots where a different species, Small's golden ragwort, whereas what is the other one called? Well, so it's Pachyra anonyma is they have very similar names, and the other Pachyra is also begins with A, but I can't recall. But it is Small's Pachyra, and it's the one that's of interest. And then there's another species And I never see anything on it. I don't even see bees on that one. This is true, so true. Like this morning I was out and I was I went to a spot that had Colville's Phacelia. And so Phacelia is a great plant and has all kinds of rare bees that go to it. And I went there and I had looked up before. So Ed Barrows had done a little study and said, well, this is basically a self-pollinated annual. And it's not really attractive to bees. And I was like, is that true? Because Phacelia is so widely planted for bees. And I went there, and sure enough, there were tons, like the whole bottomlands were covered with this plant, which was an annual, that particular one. And the flowers were small, there were no protruding stamens, and there was zero bee action on it, whereas the spring beauties had a lot of bees going to it. So you get into, it's tricky to make these statements that Phacelia is a good bee plant when some of the Phacelia are not. Same thing. Pachyra, great for Andrena gardineri, but clearly Andrena gardineri is not going to every Pachyra species, and so forth. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I have a couple other questions. So Nancy's pointing out Pachyra aurea is golden groundsel, Pachyra anonyma is the Appalachian species name. Eric wants further information. Do Andrena overwinter as adults? I'd guess not, as males are active at the same time. And then we have a bombas question after that.
Well, yeah. So the general overall pattern for bees is if you are a spring nester, then you overwinter as an adult underground, right? And if you're so let me just clarify. So a nest is made in the spring, the baby bee eats all the pollen and nectar, becomes a larva, pupates, and then becomes an adult, and then just sits there until spring. If you're in the fall, I'm being very general. So for example, do the fall Andrena do this too? But in general, in the fall, species go through those phases, but stop at the last larval instar and sit there as that last larval instar and then complete the cycle the following year. I don't know if that's always true, and there's a lot of things we don't know about bees, but that's a general pattern. Were there other questions, Claire?
Was that satisfying, Eric? Was that I just hop on. I see your hand.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that, Sam, is so it's April here in South Dakota. It's cold, yet the ground temperature is still cold. If these bees are overwintering in the ground temperature is cold. How would they know to get out and start pollinating and gathering pollen? We have apricot trees right now and close to having crab apples that are pollinating. If they wait too long because the temperature of the soil is cold and they don't realize it's really spring, when do they know to get going and doing this type of stuff? That's why I was curious where they're overwintering. And in the ground, it seems like if the ground temperature doesn't get warm, they won't come out in time. So if they're overwintering in a forest setting, especially, it's shaded. So I'm just really curious, like certain bees are out at certain times of year. If it's cold, they're not coming out.
So Brian Danforth and a couple of co-authors have a book on solitary bees, and they may discuss this. I'm just going to throw some stuff out, right? So that needs to be looked up. But my notion would be that these spring bees are overwintering as adults, and so they don't have to have enough warm temperatures to complete their cycle. They're ready to go, and that there could be just basically a countdown timer inside them, or it could be a temperature of the soil gets to a certain point, and then I think they crawl up, and then they sort of like, oh, it's too cold, and they go back in. So my impression of these very early spring bees, if you think about it, there's going to be frost, there's going to be freezes, there's going to be like you don't just come out and you're outside all the time. So on a warm day in February up here, you can get bees that are out pollinating and looking for pollen on, say, red maple, which is our first bloomer here. But then you can have atrocious weather. And my understanding is that they just simply go back into the nest they've made, or they crawl back into a hole and they hunker down. And then when the weather becomes good again, they come out. But they're going to have to do that a bunch. They have to be adaptable enough to avoid the kinds of freezes that would kill them, really, if they were out in the environment. And so I think they have that's why they overwinter, partially the answer of why they overwinter as adults, so that they can more readily go back and forth. And the signal is a very general signal in the spring, which could be temperature of the soil, and it could be a countdown timer that just keeps track of how long they've been down there. And then the rest of it is related to what the actual temperature is outside. And they'll crawl up and they're like, nope, going back in. That would be my story.
The males in particular are the ones that I kind of wonder about, because they are usually not allowed to go back into the nest afterwards. And like you said, we get frost and snowstorms and everything else up here yet. We'll get it into May. So
yeah,
it's interesting for that group of bees.
I don't know specifically, so are they not allowed to go back into that same hole, or does it do they just find another hole, or is it just like we're crawling into the duff, into the thatch, and that'll be fine for us? Because you're right, the males don't really need to be in a nest, but they do need to be protected from these late season frosts and things. So they obviously have some kind of strategy, but I'm not sure what it is.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I forget, Mike, do you want to ask your Bombas question, unless we have some other Andrena questions?
Sure. Hi, Sam.
Hey.
I've got some of the bees that I brought down to you last winter.
Uh-huh.
I got a question from Pete Woods. He thought 2 of them were Rufocinctus, Bombus rufocinctus, and I had ID'd them all as Turnarius, but they were matted on the color pattern wasn't real visible on them because the hairs were matted on the abdomen and the thorax to some extent, or worn. But I've been looking at the 2 he thought were Rufocinctus now, and I'm having the pattern seems to match Rufocinctus more on these 2, in that it's not just red-orange on T2 and T3. It's got some yellow on T2 and some orange onto T4, which seems to match Rufocinctus as at least one of the patterns for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, so I've been looking at the mandible, the malar space, and I'm having real trouble with the reflectiveness. And also it seems like there's almost 3 lobes to the hinge. It's really hard to tell where the outer edge of the hinge is for me.
Yeah. Are you talking about measuring malar spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Rufocinctus
are they males?
No, they're females.
They're females. Yeah. So I'd have to go back and review my notes, but my understanding would be that the distribution in Pennsylvania right now is pretty much only up there. Like the only one that I have ever seen, and I think maybe is Erie.
Yeah, that's where these are from.
Oh, they are. Okay. Yeah, I know I identified at least one from Erie, and so I may be wrong. So I'll have to go back and take a look at them. It's a tricky group, and the Rufocinctus is super variable in terms of its coloration patterns. I don't quite remember
I've been going through the Williams et al. Book, studying the pictures and the descriptions and looking at the Discover Life comparisons. And
well, it
just comes down to me. I'm just having trouble seeing where the outer edge of the mandible hinge is reliably. I don't know how to.
Yeah,
do
it's
that.
outside those condyles. So, but
Which are
the other thing
rounded
is,
and they slope off. You know,
yeah,
depending on how you adjust the light, you could see, oh, there's a good edge, and then you tweak the angle slightly, and the edge goes away, and you're looking at this slope.
yeah,
One thing I did notice on
Mhm.
these two, it almost seems like the base of the mandible is one of the reasons the malar space looks short is the base of the mandible looks a lot wider.
hmm
It gives me an impression that it's almost
I-
as wide as the eye.
yeah. I don't have a good answer. I do have because of our reorganization of the lab, I have a bigger reference collection now for Rufosinctus that we can compare directly. So we can next trip down, just bring them down again, and we'll.
I may bring them down, right? I may send them with Susan, give them to Susan Hemrick when I see her in June and send
Oh,
them
yeah.
down.
Yeah, do that. Um, the other thing is that Pete Wood, I've been trying to get in touch with him. I had some old email and no, I got no reply from it, but I, for some reason, got some specimens from him from the just across in Pennsylvania, just across the Maryland border, and one was Epiloides pilosula, and which is I can't even remember what whether there's one known from the state. So it's
What
a
was the
microscope
genus
specialist.
again?
Apioloides. So it's a parasitic
Oh, okay.
bee of
Yeah, I know. Okay, I
Macropus.
just,
Yeah. Anyway,
well, I'm in touch with him regularly. Do you want me
Okay.
to make sense?
Yeah, put us back together. I probably just have an old
again, or what?
Pardon?
How do you want me to? What do you want me to do? Give you the email I have, or tell him you're trying to get a hold of him, or what?
Yeah, just